For fine, elegant living, there's probably nothing finer in the area than Belgian Village. That's behind me here on Fair Hill Boulevard. These homes were built here in the heart of the city, in a very busy area. And if the Shaker Development Group has its way, we may see something similar to this across from Byron Junior High School in Shaker Heights. The land under consideration is east of Warrensville, south between the Shaker Rapid Tracks and Shaker Boulevard, east to the Beechwood border. The alternatives which eventually will face Shaker voters are four. Leave the land as it is, develop it as a recreational resource, build elegant condominiums, or build elegant condos and develop it as a recreational resource.
There have been a number of fairly serious proposals for a townhouse development or some kind of development in the area opposite Byron School. And about 2 years ago, the Planning Commission decided that it was going to institute a fairly long, drawn-out process of studying the pros and cons, studying the possibilities of either a residential development or an open space development, or doing nothing in that center strip, particularly the section of it opposite Byron School. This meeting is the second of two informational meetings which have been scheduled by the Planning Commission and the Council to present development proposals which have been prepared at no expense to the city by some very competent and interesting developers, a residential development and a what we call an open space enhancement development. These meetings, this meeting and the previous one at Byron School last month, are strictly informational meetings. We're not going to debate the pros and cons of whether there should be a development or not, but we want as many people as possible to be well informed as to what the possible developments are that are presently being considered. And sometime in September, we probably will have public hearings before the Planning Commission and Council, at which all interested citizens will be invited to debate the question whether there should be any development of any kind in any part of that center strip, as to what the course of action should be, and then the Planning Commission and Council will make the final decision.
Mr. Benjamin, tell me about the project overall and how it sort of fits into the area there.
Our charge from the very beginning was to design luxury townhouse condominiums of a certain height and a certain density. Although some publicity reached the newspapers about high-rise condominiums, this was never intended by the city of Shaker Heights, nor by the architects, nor by the developers. The project has, the way it's presently developed, a third the original proposed density of 150 units would have been allowed. We've got 50 units on the site, which is the top recommendation we can make. We think it fits in the character of Shaker Heights. Some of the first thing we looked at was the context. And by context, we mean not just some details or the 4 or 5 key styles that exist in the Shaker Heights area, but also the massing of buildings, the scale of buildings, the siting of the structures. And our intent was to develop a couple of key concept ideas that enabled new construction, not only to look a little bit or a lot like the existing houses, but also to do what we call a massing equivalency, that we would duplicate basically the size of a unit. We've done that by assembling the maybe 1,800, 2,000 square foot townhouses, is what they really are, into groups of 4 that form what we call a mansion cluster. And that mansion cluster is intended to, in essence, duplicate the look of Shaker Heights with the appropriate landscaping and formal treatment of the grounds.
So in other words, you're building the equivalent of maybe 15 or so mansions.
I think I believe there are about 10 mansion clusters is what it amounts to, of approximately 100 by 100 foot dimension, which is like the facades on the boulevard. As you drive up and down Shaker Boulevard, that's what you see now. And that's what you'll see in our project if the council okays it.
Mr. Gouda, tell me a little bit about the style that you find in these individual mansion clusters.
We started to develop a characteristic that we felt would be sympathetic with Shaker, which we might call English country style. It picks up on one of the three variants that exist in Shaker, which are identified as English, colonial, and French. Within that framework, it allowed us to develop steep roofs and the kind of two-story windows that you find on Shaker Boulevard, elegant stonework, and the kind of characteristic setting with landscape that you find that comes with this area. We think that it's important that the kind of roofery that's in this project be flexible and be able to change so they can accommodate the kind of individual client planning that we think would be appropriate to this district.
What do you mean by individual client planning?
Well, the success of many condominiums today in the market area of Cleveland offers private owners their own option to individualize their homes. And a pre-built area is not really completely successful because so many people in this price range really desire to express their own options. When people want to move into private homes today of this market range, several things become important to them. Firstly, that they have something new. That's the first thing, is they really don't want the 60-year-old home again. Secondly, what they're looking for is they often want a smaller home. They're looking for usually everything on one floor plan, and they're looking for a contemporary plan that they can live in, which some of our homes in Shaker Heights don't offer to them. They want accessibility to a rear yard through their entertainment spaces. They want accessibility from a garage directly into the house for security purposes. And they want the benefit of a common group maintenance in a complete coordinate group that provides a outdoor yard and external maintenance program as compared to individualized maintenance that occurs on separate owned lots on a separate street. And they are especially interested in a security program. All these things bring together what would be today the emphasis of townhouse cooperative condominium ownership.
Well, Mr. Benjamin, one of the engineering problems I'm sure that you'll face is the fact that you're some 80 feet from the right-of-way of the rapid. How can you conquer that problem?
That question's come up in several meetings. In fact, it's not an engineering problem, in my opinion. It's a good question to ask. I can understand why anyone, especially people who don't live along the rapid, they're interested. The questions have come up in a marketing capacity more. How are you going to sell units that are built alongside of the rapid transit? And first of all, those of you who've stood out and listened to the new rapid transit know that there's continuous rail. The new cars are, if not silent, they don't make the nice ticky, ticky, ticky sound that the old cars did. We have talked to some people about that issue in the area. Several have told us that they can't imagine what the objection would be, that they have objected to some squealing wheels on the streets when they live on a corner of a Shaker Heights street, when cars make a right turn or something. We've talked to a couple people who said as little girls growing up on Shaker Boulevard, they fell asleep to the very comforting sound of the old ticky, ticky, ticky rapid transit that won't exist anymore. Somebody's going to miss it, I'm sure. I don't consider that. We've talked to acoustical people. There are wall constructions, window constructions, assemblies, you might say, that reduce sound to deal with almost any sound. I worked on the Cleveland Hopkins International Airport terminal expansion. Obviously, the sound of a jet taking off is a little bit different than the rapid transit. I don't consider it a problem. If I were to consider anything a problem, I would consider buffering treatment along Shaker Boulevard to be more of a problem than the rapid transit. And I don't consider either a serious problem for marketing at all.
What do you mean buffering?
Buffering in terms of landscaping. I think there's sound buffering. We were talking about acoustics a moment ago, but visual buffering as well. It's like The best example I can think of perhaps is the treatment along Shaker Boulevard, the choice of landscape materials up and down a similar condition to what we'll have out across from Byron Junior High School. The use of the hawthorn trees, for example, to screen out the less attractive aspects of the wires. One of those nice shiny Italian cars going by every 20 minutes or a half hour during the middle of the day is hardly a problem, I don't think, but the poles, the wires, that kind of thing. The Shaker Square Historic District Committee, on which both Neil and I have been serving, are dealing with RTA on just such issues, the poles, the landscaping, and they've been forthcoming, and I think we've achieved some good things. We don't have nearly that kind of buffering problem out there, but it's an issue that should be dealt with from a landscape point of view.
Neil, when people move into these, I guess they're basically about $250,000, aren't they,
That's
in
the
range?
right range, yes.
Yeah. What will their lifestyle be like here? Won't they be jammed in cheek by jowl, one with another?
Well, I think we've considered that option a lot, and one thing, this is working out to be only 50 units on the entire site of 10 acres, which is it comes out to be about 4.8 units per acre. This is contrasted to the 150 units which was permissible by the invitation to bid on this project. So we have provided only 1/3 of what was allowed by Shaker Heights in the planning of this. One thing that we are dealing with is 3 primary concerns. One, that the average person in Shaker likes an elegant entrance, a private entrance onto the street or a courtyard of their own. They like to have their cars hidden from the street and not apparent as separate garage entrances, and they like to have outdoor living. And I think outdoor living of at least probably 20 by 30 feet or 20 by 20 square feet. I have such an area like that in my own home, and it's reasonably adequate for outdoor entertaining. If one can consider that they're going to have house capabilities of from 1,800 square feet to a potential of 4,000 square feet, depending on the client preference, that isn't what one would call the tight living, especially if one even thinks of the 1,800 square foot house as being one for a widower or a single person who would like something very elegant. A very nice courtyard, such as some of those that exist at Belgian Village on Fair Hill, if you're familiar with the project, is very similar to the kind of outdoor living that we're proposing. And if you know, that's a very successful project, the Belgian Village group on Fair Hill. Plus the fact the remote courtyard mews that exist on this model for separate rear yard parking, I think all of which create a summary of private living and yet some communal space and a whole hierarchy. I want to mention one thing about the rapid transits, by the way, to add to that comment. Let's remember that the rapid transit on Shaker Boulevard existed before any of the houses were built. And all the very elegant homes on that boulevard, which are today considered one of the finest boulevards in the United States. There's no question that Shaker Boulevard is one of the finest boulevards in all of the United States, were built after the railroad and right-of-way was there.
Greg, tell me a little bit about the history of this area here, would you?
Well, the site itself was really developed, or really not developed, as a situation in terms of with the northern side being completely developed very early along. The southern side was never really built until much, much later. So that the history on this side, the south side of the property, has been one of neglect as much as anything else. The city historically used it as one of their dumping grounds, for a catch-all as a nursery, and for whatever unnecessary or undesirable use that they didn't want to do somewhere else. So I think it relates historically that the pattern on this side, being much more open, really much more scraggly in terms of the vegetation and so forth, relates strongly to the fact that the north side, there were a lot more people, a lot more interested in terms of what happened.
So what we have here then would not be described in architectural or environmental terms as a precious heritage.
No, not really. In fact, it's more truly a survival of the fittest, in that those plants that you see over there right now are those that will withstand about as much abuse and lack of water as you possibly can have. So I think a lot of what's there is simply there because it could grow where nothing else would grow. And I think one of the unique things that we see over there is that we've got an opportunity of of reshaping those environments and introducing both native materials and other types of plant materials, wildflowers, some small stands of prairie that at one point had been native in this area, as well as a variety of forest types and trees to really enhance the area, as well as make it a much more exciting environment than it is right now.
Tell me a little bit in a few short words, what is this scheme of yours?
Okay. Basically, it's a two-sided scheme in terms of the options that we have. One would be to simply treat the space as a landscape element to provide some visual appeal and quality to the space, which definitely could need some improvement. The second option then, though, is to expand its use for the entire community by providing some limited forms of recreation. And in that respect, we're talking about linear types of recreation, such as hiking and jogging and small passive areas for seating and so forth. So that would really conform to the very narrow qualities that exist between both sides of the boulevard and the rapid tracks itself. And in a nutshell, really, that's what we're trying to accomplish in terms of either the landscape scheme or the recreational scheme. We see, I think, in both the potential for a lot more involvement from members of the community and interested groups within the community, whether it be the nature center, the schools, garden clubs, or the individual who simply enjoys jogging or getting out into a space that which is rare in Shaker, but a space that isn't affected by cars for such a distance. So we see that really as some of the unique aspects of the property.
So you could, in fact, jog for a considerable distance and not worry about being run over.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And we think that as an initial point for the community, and then the fact that this strip is just one tiny 1.5-mile section within a 20-mile section that begins from the Chagrin Valley Metro Park and literally runs all the way through the city and down to the lake, which is a 20-mile route that eventually could be used for biking and hiking and really an unparalleled sort of access way for recreation.
How compatible is the Shaker Development Group's plans for this segment directly across from the school with yours? In reality, I think the types of recreational uses that we're talking about and the types of development that we're talking about could be very compatible. In fact, our biggest limitation is not necessarily what's being proposed across the street as it is with the green parking lot, which really does divide the space at that point. That's going to be the most difficult design challenge in terms of getting people safely through there and also somehow create a feeling that they're not just passing through this monumental parking lot down there. So that's really our biggest design constraint and will create the most problem for us in terms of getting through the space. But I know the Shaker Development Group felt that the types of recreational elements that we're talking about really would be compatible with their type of development as well. So I think the two could fit and blend in together. Could you put a dollar value on this strip of land?
As open space, I don't think you can even place a value on it. I think it again, out of circumstances, because in the original design of Shaker, both sides of the strip were designed for housing. And there'd actually have been a roadway adjacent to the rapids. So the Depression maybe was a blessing in disguise in that it changed, of course, the whole complexion out here and has just allowed this to remain. And I think now that it has, its regional importance as open space, as well as its importance to the community, I think so significant. I don't think you can place a dollar value on it. It wouldn't be worth all the houses that could have been here at one point now to even attempt to do that in my own mind. It's unique in its form. It's unique, I think, in the conflicts between vehicular traffic and a railroad running right down the middle of it, and yet on its own so far it's basically defied all of those problems and created some very nice and unusual spaces within it. So and what I would hope that the community could do is begin to look upon it as really a wilderness resource. Wilderness is defined as uncultivated, and most of this is very uncultivated. So I think as a resource for the community, both as a wilderness resource and for the types of recreation and visual access that we hope we can provide, there is no price tag we could place on it.
As interesting as these plans seem, they are the subject of controversy. Attorney Lee Power lives across the street from the area in question. He heads up a citizens committee studying the situation.
It's a nice thing to look at. It's one of the principal reasons why people who live in this area bought their homes. And it's a concern that we have that if a residential development of that type is instituted here, it may have a negative impact on the property values of the immediate surroundings. As you can see, Doug, we live in an almost park-like atmosphere here, and we don't want to lose that. Yeah. There are other problems. There are problems with the site. Which really have not been properly addressed, I believe, by the development group. There are traffic problems, there are drainage problems on the site, and there are security problems. Most importantly, as to the development itself, I'm concerned that there appears to have been no market study done. I just wonder who is going to be the potential purchasers for units costing upwards of $225,000 who are going to live between the Rapid and a high-speed boulevard. The kinds of people who would conceivably spend that kind of money to buy that kind of a luxury condominium unit, I don't think are going to want to live within that kind of an atmosphere facing a junior high school with the kinds of security problems that young teenagers are apt to get into. And as a result, I have a concern that if the development goes forward, that the city may be left with a white elephant on its hands.
Has the committee reached any conclusion yet?
The committee really has not had an opportunity to sit down after the initial meetings where the plans that have been developed by both of these both the Shaker Development Group and the landscape architects were presented to the public. The public response in terms of attendance at the meetings was somewhat disappointing, and it's the concern of a number of the members of the each committee that there really is not enough knowledge on the part of the citizens of the city as to what is being proposed by the administration. And our concern remains as to how to make people aware of it. To give you a perfect example, one of the residents who lives probably the closest to the development itself, over on Belvoir Oval, was totally unaware of any plans for any type of development over there until I happened to be speaking with him the week before last. And the fact is that many people may hear about it, but they don't really pay much attention to it, and as a result express no concern, so that it is one of the objects of the advisory committee to see what more, if anything, can be done to make the citizens aware of it and provide an opportunity for them to respond to the administration as to what they really feel about whether or not they want to see residential development, a landscape development, or have the site left as it is.
One element in the Todd Schmid proposal is a park course. That's a sort of pathway with exercise stations where citizens may enjoy a variety of fitness equipment and physical activity. The nearest park course to Shaker Heights at the moment is in the Euclid Metro Park. We encountered Shaker resident Alex Fazekas there. Mr. Fazekas, tell me, how does this park course impress you?
It's well developed. I've noticed many people using it while I'm down here. We come down here from Collinwood High School with the girls' track team for training, for cross country and track. And a couple of times I bring my daughters down here and they join in with us.
Shaker's considering developing the area across from Byron, right along the Shaker Rapid tracks, and one of the things that they have proposed is a park course. Do you think that would be popular in Shaker?
Especially in Shaker, where there are many joggers, this is a lot more convenient on your foot, especially. We don't come up with shin splints like we do when we run on the roads. And there are upgrades and downgrades, which is a lot better than just running on a flat surface all the time. And with these various exercises along the way, we don't use them per se, but I notice many of the middle-aged people do use them. I assume that it keeps them a little bit more fitter than just plain jogging.
Would you like to see that in Shaker?
I think I would. It would keep some of the joggers off the streets, I'm sure, and it's a lot prettier running through the woods than it is running next to a car. It smells a lot better, too. For me, it would be more convenient in Shaker for my own personal use.
There is no question some work needs to be done to clean up the area along Shaker Boulevard, especially as it reaches the Beechwood border. Whether Shaker voters will eventually decide on either or both or no development plans will be determined later this year. Next month, the best of Shaker life, a selection of previously broadcast programs. Thanks for watching Shaker Life. I'm Douglas Drake.